Welcome to USA Football's Coach and Coordinator Podcast, where top football coaches from around the country share their stories, philosophies, concepts, and strategies to help you get better on and off the field. Now, here's your host, Keith Grabowski.
Hey, coaches, before we get going today, I just wanted to thank you for all you've been doing to support this podcast. And we have an incredible lineup coming up here. We have just about every major college conference represented. We have a ton of FBS coaches, Division II coaches, Division III coaches, some great high school football coaches coming on the podcast to share with you and help you grow professionally during this time. I really appreciate all of you asking your questions on Twitter. Please follow me at Coach K. Grabowski for our daily updates on our guests and your opportunity to ask questions. We will read them on the show and attribute those to you. So please contribute to the show as much as you can. Our football development model, which is something we've rolled out here at USA Football, and this is really for you to be able to help your youth football programs develop. It's about a long-term athlete development plan. It's something that comes off of the American development model, which is something that the USOC has put together. The idea is that we're able to teach skills in a progression starting at the youngest ages. We're also looking at the different game types we have, whether that's flag, which is non-contact, limited contact games like padded flag or tackle bar, and full contact, and the right progressions for contact teaching there as well. Be sure to check out all we do at footballdevelopment.com and check out what we're doing with the FDM, the football development model, at usafootball.com/FDM. On today's Coach and Coordinator podcast, we talk about an important topic, getting alignment with your external stakeholders, or in our terms, coaching them up to be able to get them on board with what you're doing and get that buy-in. And joining us on the podcast, a repeat performer to help us discuss this topic and present what's really worked for him, five-time state champion at Union High School in Tulsa, Oklahoma, head football coach Kirk Fridrich. Kirk, great to have you back on the podcast.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Keith. Having a good time listening to all this stuff. I know you're putting some stuff on the web where we can see some resources. It's crazy. I almost feel busier now trying to keep up with everyone. There's so much good information out there. And then having this podcast, I've been listening for, 2 or 3 years now. And it's definitely made some of those drives to Florida, those long windshield times. Definitely have learned a lot there. And then obviously going out on walks, I have a tendency to judge how far I'm walking on how long your podcasts are. And so I've kind of enjoyed some of those shorter ones lately.
Well, Coach, I'm going to tell you, we're going to get you in shape here because we've been able to reach out to a lot of coaches who do have time on their hands. And while I'm always very conscientious, especially those guys at the upper level who have crazy schedules of keeping them on the shorter end of things, but they've been willing to give some extra time here. So we're going to get you in shape.
I may have to break those up in a couple of days, but definitely there's some great information there.
Absolutely. Well, Coach, today I think is some great information for our listeners out there. And, I think back to, my days as a first-time head coach, or even, the times where I took over a new program, and you get so focused right away on those guys who are immediately right in front of you, your new coaching staff and your players. And the idea is you're going to get that alignment from them. And they are the most important group, right? You touch their lives daily. But, it's easy to forget everybody else who needs to be involved. But if you're going to have long-term success, if you're going to get a bunch of people in your community pulling the right way, you got to coach up those external stakeholders as well.
Yeah, I think so. It's one of those things that I think it's one of those chicken and egg things, that, which comes first. And a lot of times we are so focused on those internal things, those internal stakeholders. I mean, the people that are doing the work, your players, your coaches, and judging the satisfaction of their success and the strategy or whatever it might be, those are definitely important. But there's people that we might say on the outside, but I think they're just on the fringe that have an impact. And I've had a chance, it's been several years ago, but made a decision that I wanted to travel and kind of a bucket list thing for me is go see the University of Notre Dame and go up there and And I went up there for a spring football clinic. It was crazy. There were so many people there, but got a chance to see the campus. And if you're a football coach, I think everyone wants to go there at least once. And being from Oklahoma, that was a neat deal for us. And then when we were there, they had, a couple of outside speakers. And at that time, Urban Meyer was out of coaching, and he was there and he spoke and he talked about his, everyone when he went into a new job. I think this was the one that in Florida. And he had said that, man, every person that touches your program, you need to have impact and have input with. And he talked about the people that, the academic advisors, the cafeteria workers. I mean, it just all these people that you may overlook from time to time, they have an impact on your program. And, for me, a stakeholder, if you're going to define it, is someone who has an interest in your organization. And, in the business world, they even have shareholders, people have to invest their money. But, in coaching, we start thinking about stakeholders of, well, who are our stakeholders and who are those people that have an impact? And you've got to take some time and sit down and think about, well, who is really who really has a vested interest in how our football program is run or how our football season goes. And those are some things you can sit down and look at and define for yourself.
Yeah, and Coach, with that, it's, understanding, I guess for lack of better terms, the needs and desires of each of those different groups, because everybody wants the success part, right? But the way they're going to be involved and the way they can contribute and some of the expectations they have with that can be distinctly different from your parent group or your booster group or your administration group or, the community in general. So you have to kind of look at each of those maybe with a slightly different perspective to understand and to be able to meet those needs.
Yeah, I think so. And, a big part of where I'm going to go with this topic deals with your administration and some of those things. But if you are avoiding those types of situations with parents, or you're avoiding those deals with administration and just focusing on, your team and those, you're going to get to a point where you're going to need those people. And the way you run your program is going to determine how successful you're going to be in those people meeting those needs. And then you trying to meet the needs for those people. You can even look out there to your community and talk about your fans. And, man, we really want them on Fridays, but what did you do to coach them up? I mean, what did you do to generate interest and coach those stakeholders, those external things out there, those organizations, those groups out there, whether it's the Rotary Club or the church groups? And, we all want it at that crucial time, but what did you do in your program to invest in those types of external stakeholders? And I think it takes time as a coach to sit down. It's one of those things that I've sat down and thought, all right, who are these people? What are these outside groups or these people that are right on the fringe that have an impact, and try to coach them up and let them know what your program's about. It's amazing what you can do and the impact you can have on these people you never thought that would be a part of your program. I know at one time last year we had a deal where I'm sure a lot of teams do it, where different churches may come serve or whatever. We had some groups come out and we wanted them to cook hamburgers during practice. We did this the first 5 days of football practice. So those first, and literally those days where you're in no pads or whatever it might be, and you're going through some of your two-a-days, whatever your program is. But we scheduled different groups to come because we wanted them to be a part of our program, where some of our kids or some of our parents were thinking, hey, these groups are coming in and serving our kids, which they were. But my focus was I was bringing in 5 different groups of organizations to see what our program's about. We brought them not just to serve maybe on a Thursday night game meal or whatever it might be. I brought them right out to our practice field and had those men cooking hamburgers and watching our practice and being a part of everything we did. And it was fun to hear some of the comments of some of these older guys that were in, saying, hey, I've never went to school here. I always thought Union was a little bit different when I was growing up because I was at this school, and I had no idea, how you guys coach, or, when I had this picture of what a football coach is, and you guys gave me a different look at that. And so we gained a lot of fans just from that.
Yeah, Coach, it's one of those things, like, I find for whatever reason, some coaches out there take the approach that, they're not as accessible, or the program's not as accessible. And, I think that kind of approach maybe causes some problems immediately, because I think, people are going to have issues or concerns or whatever it might be. And if they don't have at least a contact point within your program, maybe it's not always the head coach. Number one, you're the guy or the group that can help with those concerns or can help solve a problem. They start going to each other to talk about how the problem's going to get solved. And you talk about a program that's going to be out of alignment real quick is when you don't give that accessibility. I kept it simple, and would tell, in our parent meetings and our players, et cetera, is like, there's somebody who can help you solve your problem. That's the person you need to go to solve your problem, not somebody who you're going to end up, complaining or blaming or whatever it might be. Find that person, be able to reach out to that person who can solve problems with you.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And I think that, especially in this time, we have all this time where we're not able to work our kids out, is, I would just, challenge a coach to sit down and just, look at the flow chart of the organization, and you want to think of, well, who are my stakeholders? Well, just look below you, whatever title you have, look below you. It might be some players have a stake and they have a vested interest in what you're doing. Look below in the flow chart, look above you, how many levels above you or below you, and then look to your right and left, those people that, are externally out there that can help, and then start, what are some things I can do to involve them, or what are some things I can do to coach them so they understand our program even better. And, for me, it's kind of a flywheel concept, and I said earlier, chicken or egg is, what comes first, developing players, or, well, how do you develop players? Well, you've got to have coaches. Well, how do you get those coaches? If you only have 4 coaches, how can you get 6? What can you do? Well, then, I've got to have administrator support to get that extra coach. Well, okay, so did the administrator support come first? Well, maybe it was the enthusiastic fans or the community that was pushing that administrator to realize what your program was about. So maybe the parent support, was what in the community was what caused everyone to get excited, that made the administrator think, hey, this is something we need to invest in, which caused you to do the coach. You can kind of see the momentum that you can create if you are coaching all these different aspects. And then, before long, you're just a guy that's putting in some input, but everyone being involved in your program, I think, is how you create that momentum.
Coach, I'll let you get into the details of how you coach each of those groups up. And, for you, is in looking at all these groups, is there, outside of your staff and your players, who's the first group, I guess, that you're going to look at and start to coach up?
I think for us, it's like you said, it's almost that chicken or egg. It's definitely, it's not, you've got to have a plan or a philosophy for each one of those. And for me, it's one of the things I looked at was in our athletic department, what are our goals with our athletic director? What are the goals that we have that are important to you? What's the overall, not just the football deal, what's the overall, because your athletic director or the immediate administrator that you're connected with, they have a philosophy, or they have something that if I can coach to what they think is important, then right there I've got someone who has an interest in our program. And at Union, well, the things that were important for our department was character, communication, max participation. Athletic championships is one of those, obviously, and academic championships. So, I started looking at, okay, well, one of the things that, why is max participation important? Well, it's because our superintendent believes that in a large school like ours, we need to make sure that every kid has an opportunity. And so when I start, looking at that, I start trying to sell our program, on how many numbers we have, what are we doing to increase our numbers. I start looking at our youth programs, and I'm constantly trying to push, hey, this is how many people we have in our program, or what it might be, or if character is an important thing, then I'm going to make sure that I'm showing examples of where we're doing those things. So I'm coaching to that person because I found out what was important to them. And so that's the next question I think that you look at, is once you identify, who that stakeholder is, whoever it might be, is start to find out what's important to them. And so that you can adjust, much like we would with a football player. Some kids they like, to be a little more abrasive in your coaching, and some kids want to have things explained a little bit better. We all have different buttons that we push. And so, finding out what's important to those people. So, one of the things I think that has really helped me in my experience is constantly having open communication with our superintendent. And, some guys are in places where they're like, well, I don't have access to my superintendent. Well, it's probably because the only time you ever are with him is when he has a problem with you or you have a problem with him. And I mean, sit down and, go have coffee and have no agenda whatsoever. I mean, don't go to have every month I want to just go, let's go have coffee together. I want to be an ambassador for this district. I don't want to just be the football coach. I want to be an ambassador. I want somebody that, because we are so visible, our programs, football is so important to a lot of people, is what can I do to help you? And so then if you're used to just having those meetings, and you're used to going and having those cups of coffee or whatever it might be with your superintendent, then that time where you do have a need, or you do need something to, hey, I really need to get this coach hired. I can't wait till April, to find this spot. I need to get him in January because he's going to be hired by somebody else. Then, you're used to meeting with them, and it just kind of takes the edge off of some of those.
Yeah, it's one of those things, Coach, because we all have those kind of relationships when, the only time you hear from somebody is when they need something. You're like, oh, geez, what is it now? So it kind of, it develops the relationship, which is for all of these groups, whoever it is, whether it's always you or somebody on your coaching staff serving as a liaison. Like, that's the kind of environment, that's the kind of climate you want to create, that, hey, we're always going to stay in touch. And then there are going to be times when I need you for something and we'll ask. But it can't be just, hey, you're going to hear from me when I need something, or I'm going to hear from you when you need something, right? That becomes, that's not really a relationship. That's not what you're looking for.
I totally agree with that. And so, the same thing, parent-wise is, if you only just have that one parent meeting a year, which we have that parent meeting, it's important. But to have things where let your parents know about your booster club, and it's one of those things we've got to do a better job of with our kids, is our kids need to understand it's important for me and for your parents to be a part of our booster club, not just from the financial standpoint, but for our parents to know that, once a month, once a week, whatever it might be year round, I'm at these meetings and I'm answering questions and I'm talking about our program, not just that August meeting. It's all that, it's year round for us. And so for them to have access to your coaches and for you to be able to share those types of things, we've got a mom's group, the Mama Skins. I know everybody probably has something, but though, there's no better group than that group of moms to have them a part of things, and finding ways to let them set up socials where you can be and just let them see the real person behind, and the coaching really helps with that.
Coach, as we sit here and you mentioned, like, now you're busier than ever at a time when, we're all socially distancing, that, we're definitely learning how to work virtually. And I could tell you, it's tough. I'm on the parent end now. And it's tough to always be able to get to those meetings, with whatever is going on. And I think those live meetings are important, but I think you can intersperse them with maybe something like a Zoom meeting, right? Where everybody can hop on and be where they need to be. You need to be, you're where you are, and it could be, kind of that touch point live with people there hearing you live, answering questions that might come up, but at the same time, I guess, isn't as intrusive on life as having to, get in your car and show up at some place and be tied up for an evening in a meeting. So I think, I think we're all learning that there's other ways of doing it right now.
Yeah, I think that there's no doubt that this has accelerated coaches in their use of technology, even parents. We're probably going to be 5 years ahead of where we would be before any of this ever started. I know that, in our program, we're these learning management systems that we use in our schools now. We use Canvas or whatever it might be, where kids, teachers have all their stuff online, and the kids are used to those kinds of things. And as a football coach, I couldn't tell you how to log into that, but I've got a whole staff full of guys that because they're teaching class, they know exactly how to do that. And we're not posting anything into this learning management system for football. And I'm like, this makes no sense. We should be doing these types of things. We should be doing things. I talked with our AD a few days ago about, let's go ahead and host a recruiting seminar on Zoom. I mean, as you said, it's so hard to get parents together. That's just one more meeting up at the school. Let's get myself, let's get a basketball coach, let's get our guidance counselor. Let's all get on Zoom and let parents, because eventually life's going to go back to normal, but we might as well get a lot of really good information out there about, NCAA eligibility and those types of things.
Well, Coach, I kind of threw you off track there just talking about the different groups. Next group from there that you really look to coach up.
I think when you talk about enthusiastic fans or community, I think one of the things is you've got to have a program that your fans can be proud of. What can they get behind? Is it, maybe it's wins, maybe it's championships, which there's no doubt that's important, but there's lots of things you can do to have your fans, be proud of who you are. For us, we have a Redskin, what we call Redskin Aid, which stands for athletes impacting the district. What are things that our kids can be involved in, and how can we serve the community? And it really wasn't intentional. We've done some things with our Special Olympics, and we've gone out. They were doing a big technology upgrade, and where they were having to move all these computers in and out of these buildings over the summer while the teachers were gone. And so just contacting the district IT director and said, hey, you know what? He was saying, hey, this is going to be a tough job for us. I said, well, this will be pretty easy because we've got 100 kids that come up and work out in the summer. We'll just have those guys tell them they're staying an extra hour and a half after workouts, and we'll get every one of those computers taken out of those classrooms for you in the whole high school. And things like that. Man, that IT director, he was probably going to be coming to our games, but man, he has an interest. He saw us with the sideline replay system, and the way we were trying to set up our TVs at a game, and he said, this is ridiculous. He goes, I've got a better way to do this. And before long, we had like some $4,000 trunk that had electronic TVs coming out of it. It was pretty cool, but just reaching out and trying to find ways for your fans, the Rotary clubs and all those kinds of people to be excited and be proud of your school and your community. Those things are important, and explaining that to your players, because it's, obviously in the culture that we have is that we want our fans to be proud of who we are. And one of the biggest things we do is our national anthem. We will always have our team out for the national anthem. I know a lot of teams do that. In some parts of the country, they don't. I know here in Oklahoma, usually the national anthem's played while the players are still in the locker room, and we changed that culture for our kids, and that's something now in our program that's important, and a lot of our fans appreciate that. And so a lot of those things are things you can do, and we all have to take time to develop our philosophies. I mean, what are we really passionate about, in our program? What can we do that we're really good at? And and what drives our resource engine. I mean, I think those three questions, and that's a Jim Collins good to great concept that he had. That, I mean, it's true. When you talk about, what is your hedgehog? I mean, what are you really good at? This sounds like, Coach Fred at Union's doing all of these several different things over and over and over and over and over. But, it really is. It all kind of goes down to just one simple concept: is we want to develop champions. We want to build champions, on and off the field, and get our all these people excited about it.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, like just being creative with it. And I've seen it done different ways. I've been a part of programs that have really reached out to different people, again, within their whole stakeholder community, to get that involvement, right? So for example, when I was at Baldwin-Wallace, our head coach, John Snell, who's been on this podcast before, one of the things we did was a professor day, and our seniors would reach out to that professor who had made a difference for them, in their academic career. And before the game, they would present them. I think what we did was had a framed program from that day, from Professor Day, autographed by the player who was giving it to him, so they could put it up on the wall in their office, and they would just present that to them pre-game, in a small little ceremony for Professor Appreciation Day. But you talk about, now that group, right? Those professors came and showed up for games and were really interested in what our student athletes were doing and supported us. And, you talk about the effect of those things. And I'm talking about college, but, the recruiting process became easier for us, because when we would have, for example, a kid who's, let's say he's sports management, and, we've been developing this relationship through our players with, as well as our coaches, with the sports management professor. Now in recruiting, that person actually became somebody who was a valuable part of that process. Hey, we have, so-and-so from here who's interested in this program and coming here. And I mean, now it's not just, the coach calling that kid up, that now, they might get a call from that professor. Heard you're interested in our sports administration program. I'd like to tell you more about it. Right now, just think about the impact of that on a program. Again, I'm giving you an example for college, but how that is far-reaching.
The one thing about it, Keith, is that professor was always there. I mean, that they had an interest. You just cultivated it. And I mean, you let it grow. I mean, all of this is out there if we'll just take an opportunity to look at it. And I love the quote, John Maxwell, and the author on leadership that's been around for a long time, but he talked about Coach Wooden, and the quote was, "You don't just meet the coach, you experience him." And I think that's the key is I want people to experience who I am and what our program is about. And I think you told me this a couple of years ago. I just you see the stuff on Twitter, and I'm trying to get better. I'm just not real good at it. And I'm not anti-technology at all. It's hard for me I want it to be about Union football, and I want it to be about our kids, and I want to be an ambassador. I don't want it to be a Coach Fred type of deal. But, the way you explained it to me was, don't you want your parents and your people to understand what you're about? And I think that's so true. I think social media for me needs to become, and I'm trying to get it to become a platform where it's not promoting me, it's promoting, letting people know what I'm about. And that's a great resource.
I guess staying along the lines of examples here, and, again, these stakeholders meetings and what you're able to do and talk to different people with those. Go ahead and give us another example of that as we close out the podcast.
Yeah, I think when you talk about administration specifically, and to me, this is always one where when I talk to other coaches, they have it somewhat of an interest in that. Two things. One is all of us have someone that we immediately report to. And I think that it's very clear when you take a job that, in the final stages of when the job's been offered, I think one of the questions that we always need to ask is, well, who do I report to? And I think that needs to be very clear. And usually we're in a meeting with, if you're at the point where you're taking a job, you're usually in a meeting with a superintendent. at that point. And I don't know too many superintendents that aren't going to answer that question with, well, you report to me. And so therefore, right away, hey, I've got a relationship. I just got an invitation for a relationship with the person who makes a lot of decisions for our football program. And so I just need to cultivate that. I need to understand that, okay, he said I report to him, or whoever they say you report to. And then the next question that comes up a lot of times is, well, I don't want to look like I'm going over someone. So if you have a principal or athletic director or a director of extracurriculars, whatever that is in between you and that superintendent, you need to make sure that you invite all of them to the meeting. You may be just, you are going to talk to the superintendent specifically, but you want to make sure that those other people don't feel like you went around them. So you just get them all in the same room. And then that way you're speaking directly to the superintendent without someone thinking you're going above them. But every year, I think it's important that you have an end-of-season meeting. You need to call that meeting yourself and have your athletic director, whoever it might be, and schedule an hour of time with the administration. And I usually try to do it those 2 or 3 days right before Christmas break or whatever it might be. Everybody's kind of in a festive mood anyway, and just try to get in there and just sit down. And I used to do a report on Word, and then I started using PowerPoint. And I don't use a PowerPoint presentation in this meeting, but I use PowerPoint just because it's easy to print off slides and make a nice little folder out of it. And it's full of pictures because truly, pictures worth 1,000 words. I think, for our superintendent to see a picture of our kids, carrying those computers, helping with Special Olympics, all the different things, aspects of our program. And I go back on Twitter or Facebook or our coaches, where all those things that are out there, and I just find those pictures from the entire year. And I try to have that end of season meeting with him. And so he can see all the things about our program. I obviously talk about, our game results. I talk about our junior high teams, our youth teams, and I cover all those things like max participation, those things that are important to him. How did you communicate with everyone? What were all these different meetings you had during the year? And just try to show those things, talk to him about our offense and our defense a little bit. What was our scoring average? Were there any records? Was there a game passing record that was set by a kid? So they want to hear and know those types of things, the things that we did within the community, go over all that. How many kids were, what was our GPA for our class? What was it in the years past, not just this year, but what was it? Well, we were at a 3.0 last year. We were at a 3.01. So we dropped just a little bit, but those, whatever the good news, bad news is, let him know what those things are. And then I think the biggest thing is finish with a couple of things. Rank your staff. I will put a list of our coaches, and I will rank them from 1 to 5. And I go over this, and this is another topic, but one of the stakeholders you have, obviously internal, is your staff, but I rank them 1 through 5, and I let him know that a 5 is, this guy's irreplaceable. And that way, if something happens, whether it's budget cuts or a principal wants to move somebody, or this guy's thinking about taking a job somewhere, he knows right up top that these 2 guys on my staff, I cannot lose. I've got a strength coach right now that I do not want to lose, and he needs to do everything possible if it ever comes up to keep this guy. And then I let our staff know that guys that are ranked number 4 are ones that are in a leadership position or should be. I mean, these are guys that you may lose because they're going to go be a coordinator somewhere, or they're going to go get a head coach, but they're really important to your staff. And because they're in a leadership position or should be in a leadership position, we've got to make sure their teaching level and their teaching load is less than the guys that might be a number 3, or a 2 or a 1, or these guys. This is a decision I need to change up. This guy needs to be trained or traded, And so I try to let him know about our schedule and then the next year's outlook. We've only got 4 guys coming back on offense. You kind of give him a heads up. Hey, this next year may, and it always ends up, well, I know you're a good coach and you'll figure it out. And then you're like, oh, great. but you kind of let them know in the ninth grade, these were the teams that we were competing with. And these two teams in our ninth grade conference were, I mean, we split with them. We won one, they won one. So, here in a couple of years, that's what it's going to look like. Those types of, you just kind of give him a forecast, and we all can do those things. And then, like I said, I finished with decisions he made within this past year that had a huge impact on our program. And it might be a picture of a coach that you got to hire. It might be a new uniform. It might be, new weight equipment. 2 years ago, we bought an equipment trailer that was really helpful for us, especially since we started taking some of those trips to Texas and playing some games. And so you really brag on the things he did, whether he paid for it or decisions he made that directly impacted. And then the next thing is you ask him about needs. I mean, here's some things that we really need. And if I could give you any advice, go ahead and have the quotes ready, because if you need a new sled or you need a new set of uniforms, typically they'll say, "Well, get that back to me." Well, you know what that means is that it's going to get hidden on his desk. And so for me, I will always have that quote, and I will hand it to him right there. I mean, it's quoted out, it's ready to go. And he may not sign off on it right then, but he will have it. And it's a great way to for everyone in the room to know what you need as soon as they get back from Christmas. These are going to be the things you really need to get done for the following year.
Wow, some really, really good suggestions there. I'm writing so many down in the notes. The idea of a forecast, right? So important. Sometimes we know intimately about that program and the kids we're coaching, and we can't assume that everybody, especially those stakeholders outside that inner circle, understand it. I could think back to a year where we had what appeared to be, and this is when I was a head high school coach, appeared to be kind of dropped off by a couple wins this year, but that senior group coming up through junior high all the way up even into when they were JVs had not experienced a winning season. They were a group that struggled, but they really got it together. And so for them to have a 6-4 was a huge accomplishment. Not where we wanted to be by any means, but we understood what we were up against. And now, you have the opportunity with all of this to be sharing, the story of what's going on in your program. Just some incredible ideas there, Coach.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, Coach, for our listeners, if they have any questions for you, I know you said you're going to be more active on Twitter, so you might have some DMs there, but best way to reach you.
Yeah, I think, Twitter, I guess everyone keeps saying reach out there, and that probably is the fastest, especially since my name's so hard to spell on email, but just at Coach_Fred, Fred. I may answer you back with email rather than answer so I can figure out the DM on Twitter, but I know that I have gotten a few DMs, and I do know that I do know how to find them. So, but that would probably be the fastest way, and plus it'll teach me how to use it better.
Well, Coach, as always, I appreciate you taking time, and I once you come on this podcast, I kind of consider you a part of my team, so I always follow what you guys do, and I'm excited to see what you do here in 2020 once you're able to get things rolling again.
Yeah, we're excited. We've got a new coordinator, Dub Maddox, and known Dub for a long time, and real excited about what we've been doing so far and where we're headed.
Coaches, again, I want to remind you of what we're doing with the football development model. Please push this down to your youth coaches. I think this is a great way for you to get some organization and structure beyond what you've already done. Check it out, all of our program development for youth football at fdm.usafootball.com. Again, check out our systems for blocking, tackling, and defeating blocks at footballdevelopment.com. If you register with your email, you get your choice of 3 free videos. There's some great things in there. I think things that as you get going again, you can get into the summer and maybe make up on some things that you might have lost if you had a spring ball, if you had time here in the spring to work on football. Some great drills for all those phases of contact. If you're enjoying the podcast, please head over to iTunes or your platform and give us a 5-star rate. If you have a minute, write a review. We really appreciate it, and we will read your review on our highlight show that we do at the end of the week.
Thanks for listening to USA Football's Coach and Coordinator Podcast. For more resources, visit the Coach Performance Center at usafootball.com.